Hey there, Vince. Hmm. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hmm. Can you hear me? Oh, fantastic. All right.
Now I can, yeah.
So I was trying some new headphones, but it sounds like maybe they're not gonna be the ones for me. Are you in the hospital?
Yeah, I am, yeah. Yeah, just a procedure to see if I've got cancer.
Oh, oh
No,
my.
no, it sounds dramatic, but it's not. No,
Okay.
I've had a course of 4 radio frequency ablations on my esophagus because
Hmm.
of Barrett's esophagus I've got.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he finished the last one and said, "I'll see you in 6 months just to check it." And then a couple of weeks later, he came back and said, "No, I want to see you in 8 weeks because pathology came back with a high grade dysplasia or a cancer um, at a
Mm-hmm.
certain spot in my esophagus. So he just wants to check that now that it's healed up. That's all. It's
So they're gonna
most
take some more biopsies?
Yeah, that's what they'll do. Yeah, well, see, what he does is apparently takes a biopsy every 2 centimeters when he's finished that job anyway, and one of them came back. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the most likely thing is pathology has got their knickers in a knot. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows?
Well, it's kind of their job, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
They can't take it too easy. That's that's uh,
yeah.
so are you getting ready for the procedure or have you already had it and are
No, no, I'm
recovering?
having it tomorrow morning.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. And it's 4 p.m. where you are, so you're just getting in for kind of an overnight stay and then
Yep,
tomorrow.
yep. Yeah, yeah. I don't know why he did that. When the first couple, I came down on the day of this procedure, but then he said, "Oh, I want you in the day before, and I want you to stay the night afterwards as well." So who
Hmm.
knows? I just do what I'm told, eh?
Yeah.
You know, these doctors,
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a fine way to do it. I don't know. But yeah, all right. I hope it all goes well.
oh yeah, it will. I don't have any worries. I'm not concerned. Yeah,
Well, that's good. That sounds like the way to be.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I listened. When I left the other day, I missed the last little bit with you and Marius and so on, and I listened to that on the way down. Actually, it was convenient for me to listen to that, and yeah, um, I do concur with what they say about it. Appears that you are not. I don't know how to put it. You're not acutely aware of what you feel. You know, your emotions are a little bit dampened by something.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I definitely can't disagree with any of that. I will say that I think it was whenever we talked, it was Sunday. I was very surprised at how triggered I was by sort of, I guess, my mother's involvement in all of this, you know?
Yep, yep, yep.
I was really genuinely surprised at how angry I got. Like it hadn't happened in a while. So um I don't know. In a sense, I'm just kind of like, okay, well, there's some emotion that
Absolutely.
um
Now, when you say it hadn't happened in a while, had you
yeah.
experienced a similar emotion with your mother in the past for other things?
Yes, I have. But a long time ago, probably like years ago.
Oh, okay, okay. So this is really dug deep then. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, she can be a very difficult character when she wants to be, and it's like a high conflict style of of interaction at times. And I guess, just the last time that this kind of happened, my sister was coming to visit me from California, and she wanted to see my kids. And so my mom also wanted to come visit, but my sister asked that, you know, everybody get vaccinated or at least like test themselves for COVID or something. And my mother refused. And, I was just like, well, it's really what we would prefer. And she was kind of like, I'm your mother and I get to come be at your house if I want to be. Like, you can't tell me not to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So your mother watches Fox News, does she?
She is, yeah, she is that kind of person. But yeah, it was, there's a lot of entitlement coming from her end, and also I felt a bit caught in the middle because it was kind of my sister who was asking for this,
Yeah, yeah.
and I mean I agreed with her, of course, but yeah, so that was the last time I remember getting like just really upset, talking to my mother on the phone. Um, but yeah, since that time, I haven't really had too much. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I have great access to my emotions. It's a welcome thing if I can find myself um, feeling any kind of deep emotion
Hmm.
for me. Yeah.
Yep, yep. I get it. Yeah. Could you, or would you, or what is your reaction to me saying that chances are that you do experience deep emotions, but that you're not aware of it, that there's something blocks your direct awareness of it.
Um, I mean, what would my reaction be? Uh, I mean, yeah, that sounds right.
Right? Or the
Um,
alternative is that you don't experience deep emotions. Would that be the case? I don't think so. But yeah, who knows?
I, yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I have to say that may also be a possible. I feel like that may be a possibility because, when I think we've spoken before about, I do have a propensity to like depressive episodes. And when that happens, there is deep emotion there. A lot of it is like fear, like sadness, despair, but it is a bit frozen, like I can't, there's
Okay,
no, Mhm.
so let's put it another way then. The deep emotion that we're talking about, what about anger? What about big outgoing emotions? Anger, even great enthusiasm.
Yeah, I would say those are expressed pretty rarely. Like very, very infrequently. And less so now compared to maybe years prior. Uh, I don't know, actually.
Mm, mm. Yeah, all these are things to discover, aren't they? So it's
Yeah.
just a case of put it out there, and then you watch. You'll see. You don't have to do anything. It'll show itself. If that
hmm
happens or not. Yeah.
Mm. But I was wondering whether I should, try to go to, there's kind of like a virtual circling group on Wednesday nights. And usually, I haven't been going because it doesn't really match up with like my schedule. But just based on what Marius said, I was like, well, maybe I should really make more of an effort to get there. And even if I'm not the one, you know, in the circle doing the work, just kind of seeing other people do it might be
Yep.
might be helpful for me. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you will experience your support for them as they're talking, and that will then reflect back. You'll find that if you talk, you'll again appreciate support that they might give you. So presumably that circle, that would be pretty non-judgmental kind of
Mhm.
support that you would get from them, eh?
I think so. It's been a while since I've been there, but yeah, I mean, they seem like a pretty good group of people who've been doing this for a while. Um, it occurs to me that occasionally when I'm in these circles, like there have definitely been times where I felt some kind of judgment for whoever's speaking, and I feel like, that is mirrored in the experience of like when I'm the center of attention, I'm fearing judgment, or I feel that worry of judgment myself, so I think,
Yeah, I get
when
that.
I
Yeah.
was, yeah, when I was speaking with Marius and Dennis and the group, yeah, there was almost like a bit of an apology, just like, well, I'm sorry for taking up all this space and like
Yeah, I
saying
heard
all
that.
this
I
stuff.
heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was listening to that, I wanted to shout out there. You take all the time you need. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And like I definitely felt supported. There was no reason for me to feel like, oh, I'm, such and such person is judging me, but it does come from I feel like it's internally generated where it's like, ugh, it feels uncomfortable for me to be out here. And I think that's partly because I've been in the situation where I'm listening to somebody else speak and I've kind of judged them a little bit too. So it's a
Hmm.
reflection of kind of what's there for me sometimes.
So, what comes to mind when I say, "Who taught you to be this way?"
Hmm. I mean, I think I would have to say that my mother probably played a role in it. Um,
Yeah. Was she pretty stroppy when you were young? She telling you what to do all the time and how to be and so on?
yeah, I mean, I would say she's a pretty judgmental person a lot of the time. It's always kind of a running commentary. Like when we went to restaurants and stuff, she'd have a lot of opinions about like the food, the staff, all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. So if you live with that all your life when you were young, of course you learn how to be that way, don't you?
yeah,
Right. Now,
yeah,
now, the first thing is we need to state that we're not judgmental about your mother. Your mother is your mother, and that's the way she is, right? So there's not, and you don't expect that she's going to change, most likely. That's just the
mm-mm,
way she is, and she'll probably always be that way, and so on. And we love her anyway, in spite of the fact that she's a stroppy bitch, or however you want to put it.
mm,
Yeah. Well,
mm-hmm.
maybe I went too far then, but you know
Nah,
what I
I don't
mean.
think so. Yeah.
We do love her in spite of that kind of thing, and yet it's taught you how to be. You've learned from that happening to you. You learned a couple of things. You learned how to be that way with other people, but you also learned how to be that way with yourself, right? So when your mother wasn't there telling you how to be and having opinions about what you're doing, you do it for her. This is a normal evolutionary thing that happens. You will take over for your mother when you leave home, and she'll still be there in your mind, but it's your voice that's doing it,
Hmm.
that's saying things about you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right.
So what we're looking at the moment is discovering how deep that stuff goes. And the fact that you have, it doesn't sound right to say you have trouble, but the fact that it's a little difficult for you to get in contact with your deep emotions would suggest that as a kid, this is to me my story, that as a kid that you were in survival mode. That might be sound a bit extreme, but you were always defensive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that rings true for me.
Right, yeah. And wouldn't want you being spontaneous. If you suddenly burst out being loud, she would jump on you pretty quickly, I'd imagine.
Um, well, so I think, what comes to mind for me is that like my mom and my dad fought a lot growing up, and I think it was like um well, I don't even know if this is related, but their fights were pretty intense and they would get kind of a lot of shouting and sort of physical altercations. And I just remember when that happened, like my sister and I would sort of just like hide, we'd
Yeah,
try to find
yeah.
a place to hide together. Um,
Well, that's certainly survival, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of what came to mind.
Mm. So here's a thing. When you recognize this stuff in you, it's gonna dissipate. It's gonna change to one degree or another. Who knows how far? But it's like you're going to be a different person.
Hmm.
Are you prepared to live with yourself as a different person? Or have you got an investment in being the way you are?
Um, I
I'm not,
feel,
I don't really expect an answer.
yeah. I mean, I can give you one anyway, which is that I feel pretty ready to be a different person.
Great,
Or
great.
yeah,
Yeah, that's big, yeah.
yeah,
And it's not really a different person. That's just a bit of a silly way to put it, because what we're going to do is uncover what actually is there. We're not going to change you into somebody else. We're just going to reveal the Ray that's been locked away for all these years, kind of thing.
yeah. Well, I'm not sure how related this is, but I was talking with a friend earlier tonight about kind of the dissolution of the ego and sort of like you know, kind of losing the illusion of the self and like to be willing, the fear of that and kind of like the willingness to do such a thing is almost it's a kind of suicidality almost, right? Like the ego, you to want to be rid of your ego and yourself as you know it is a I mean, there's for me there's not really any other way to think about it. Um and I think like with the things that I'm kind of going through and sort of like the despair that I touch into from time to time, I don't know. I think I may be deluding myself, but I think I'm pretty close to wanting to just eh, just feeling like the ego and the self that I have right now. um I guess the value hasn't been that much lower than it is right now, you know what I mean?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So when you're saying like are you willing to be a different person, I'm like yeah.
yeah, yeah,
you know
good.
i'm
Yeah, yeah,
i'm pretty ready to let go of the person I am now. And I don't mean that in a way to be like concerning or like self-pitying, really, but it's just like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I could be done with this for a minute. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, of course, the reality is that we can't really get rid of Ray and produce a new one. We're just going to, I don't know, open the book a little bit and let the moths out,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah. The ego thing is rather interesting, like, so if we define the ego, and when we use ego in a let's say a a pretty relaxed social situation. What we're really talking about is self-aggrandizement, right?
Hmm.
You know, the kind of thing that Trump does all the time. He's always patting himself on the back and saying how good he is and how high his IQ is and all this kind of stuff. And it's really obvious that he's just trying to make himself feel good. You'd call that ego. I would call that ego.
Hmm.
Um, but then it kind of spreads, and you know, you can say that ego. See, there's no such thing as ego. That was just Freud's idea of something. But okay, so you can also say that when we've got a self, well, when we are deluded into thinking that a self is running the show, that everything that comes from the self is protective. I've developed this story that says to me that self is really body armor. It's a way of trying to protect us from feeling bad.
Hmm.
Self doesn't do much in the way of making us feel good, but its job is to stop us from feeling bad. So we tell it stories. Now, the whole thing about ego and self is it's all stories. It's all about stories. And some stories, well, all stories we react to, respond to, or react to. Probably react is more like it. But those stories that are in particular defensive stories, they're the ones that we talk about as being inappropriate, maladaptive. They're the ones where that cause the suffering and so on. But the whole purpose of stories that we've developed since we've had them, right, which is probably the beginning of time, has been to try and make ourselves feel better. It's always about feeling better.
Hmm.
We just want to feel good.
Yeah.
And in the short term, we can stroke the ego and tell stories about the self that make us feel good, but they don't last. They fall apart fairly easily too, simply because they're stories about a story. There's nothing substantial in there. So what we want to expose in you is what is substantial.
And that raises a question for me as to how I do that, which is, a bit of seeking and uh but yeah, I mean that's the question, right?
Right. So notice what I said was we want to reveal
Mm,
what is substantial. So we're not going to put anything in there that's not there. We're just going to
mm,
reveal what is there. And we're just going to do that by basically by removing the stuff that covers it up, the rubbish stuff that covers it up. That's pretty vague, I know.
I mean, that honestly, that sounds great to me, but the question is again raised, how do I remove this? How do I remove this stuff?
You well, you don't, and you can't.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hmm.
So so what will change it is being aware of it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you've already gone down a fair bit of the road on this in this direction. You know, you already see a lot of that kind of stuff, but it's just a case of fine tuning it. So
Hmm.
so what covers it up? always is stories. And believing stories is more to the point. It's not the story is not the issue, but believing the stories is the issue. The hooks that you've got into the story or that the stories have got into something else, that's where um, that's the stickiness of it. That's what we need to change.
Hmm.
See, I've had this thing. You tell me what again. You've got to be really blunt with me. Tell me what you reckon about this. But I've had this idea in my head that you think that everything that is wrong with your marriage is your fault.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Um,
Or good.
yeah, yeah. Um, I kind of go a little bit back and forth where it's like there are definitely times where I can see that it's nobody's fault, really. I mean, um,
What about a sneaky one that says, well, if you were different, things might be
y-
better?
yeah, that one is there for sure. Yeah,
Well, that's just a sneaky way of saying the same thing, though, isn't it?
it is, right? And so, um, yeah, I mean, I think at the root of all of this, uh, there's something that there's something that says that, you know, I have these depressive tendencies and I have difficulty connecting with people, and it's hard for me to be happy, and therefore hard for me to make others happy, um, and be worthy of their love, right? And so, like, there is that narrative for sure, and there are times where I can feel like, well, that's not my fault, you know, like
Mm,
I feel that way, and even if I think that's true, which there's definitely times when I do, that's not my fault, but I can still be kind of sad about it.
yeah, and perfectly reasonably so. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
but
think with my,
there's
Mhm.
yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, I think with my wife, like, I recognize that there's certain things that she prioritizes over, um, like our relationship, and while I certainly you know, felt some anger about that in the past, or alarm. I mean, I think anger is probably a fine way to put it. At this point, I'm just like, well, that's who she is, that she can't really change that. Um,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
so, so it's not her fault in that way. Um, and I think it's a lot easier for me to see that than to, well, I don't know. I just so I don't blame her. I don't really blame myself so much, but as we've kind of said, I sort of have a sneaky thing that says, like, I have these things inherent in who I am that make it really difficult for me to be in a relationship, or for someone else to be in a relationship with me.
Okay, yeah. So that sounds closer to a story about what is actual than
Mm,
anything that's got to do with blame or whatever, fault. Um,
mm,
so yeah, but again, right, you could say circumstances at the moment are such that it's not that those circumstances are not compatible with the kind of relationship you'd really like to have with your wife and your kids. It's just the way it is at the moment. You could then extend that backwards in time, and you could say, well, once upon a time it wasn't that way. When we first got together, there was compatibility and circumstances were such that we had a different kind of relationship. But over time, they've devolved into this, what we've got at the moment. And we don't quite know how or why, because too many of the circumstances are not clear. But we can deduce that it is a result of circumstances. And we could even go as far as to say circumstances that have changed from the early days to now.
Yeah. I think the way that I would characterize it is that um, the relationship is the relationship has changed, and that basically my wife has lost patience with the flawed person that I am. Like I don't think that I've changed that much. In the beginning, when our relationship was good or better, I still had these depressive tendencies, and I still felt like flawed and occasionally unhappy, and was difficult to be around. But I think we had a stronger connection there, almost because she was more compassionate and willing to tolerate that.
Yep,
And then
yep.
as we had kids and she kind of took on more work responsibilities, I think she just got tired of dealing with me.
Yep, yep. Okay, so something around her that we don't actually know. It's not that clear, but something's
Mhm.
changed there as well. That seems to be
Yeah.
more the obvious thing, and it's pretty easy to see that it's not something that she had control of. It's just circumstances again that changed. They all
Yeah.
added up to something that was different. Yeah. So maybe as you say, it was mostly that she expends most of her energy somewhere else and got nothing left for the relationship thing. And so the idea of finishing that relationship appeals to her as a way of recouping some of that energy. But do you get though that what I'm saying, the way I'm talking about this is no blame. It is just
Hmm.
circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm a lot of times that is how I'm able to see it. Um, I would say,
Hmm,
or at least right now, everything you're saying and the way you're saying it makes sense to me.
hmm. So if there's nothing you can do to
Hmm.
reveal a different ray, a ray that's probably been in there but hidden, or whatever, depressed even, as in pushed down rather than depressed as in depression, but
Hmm.
suppressed, a ray that's been suppressed.
Hmm.
Because, and I say this because just look at kids. You can just see kids are just enthusiastic. They run around and they shout out and express themselves big time. That's something that we've all got in us when we feel the right way. But your
Hmm.
that bit of you is pretty well
Yeah.
underneath.
Suppressed or
Yeah,
repressed.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So thing is, as much as we would love to have a formula or a recipe or whatever you want to call it that is going to fix this, there isn't one.
Hmm.
But what we do know is that by getting, all right, it's not quite right, but getting in touch with that side of you, or getting in touch with what actually goes on with you, uh, that will reveal it. That will take away whatever's pushing it down. And so that you could almost go as far as to say the main culprit in the way you are at the moment are stories that you believe. Now, some of those stories may be obvious as stories, and others you don't even know about. They've been taken on by the body from when you were
Mhm.
really young, maybe. But essentially, they are stories. They're all stories that have resulted in this kind of thing. Beliefs you've got about the way the world works and the way you are.
Yeah.
Now, if we take into account that fact that as a human, we've been brought up in a society that pays great homage to ability and success, etc., right, then every part of society is going to be telling you, you can do something about this, you can fix it. But
Mhm.
do you recognize that anything that you do, anything that you apply to this is actually going to fail? It's not, or it's going to make it worse, maybe, or at least it's not going to be in the direction of what we want to happen. I almost said the word success there, but yeah.
Yeah.
So what we've got, which is the hardest thing of all, is we've got a recognition that we simply need to experience what actually goes on for us, um, and in doing so without opinion or judgment, right? That allows it to change.
Mhm.
So
Um,
there's not really any way of saying that without it sounding like doing, but essentially, it's not it's it's not what we would describe as doing that's the issue, but rather the energy that we bring to it, the attitude that we bring to it. So what we want to do is look at whatever we're experiencing without forming any judgment about whether it's good, bad, right, wrong, appropriate or inappropriate or anything else. Right? So this works for everything. It doesn't matter what it is that you experience. If you are simply aware of the experiencing at a level below labels, beneath labels. So you got to this is gets as close to doing as you can possibly get to, and that is don't apply labels, or rather, no, that's a stupid thing to say. When labels turn up, recognize that they're inappropriate, because every label, no matter what, a label as simple as brown has morality stories attached to it. You know, we find that everything we put is good or bad, better or worse, whatever, all of that stuff goes on. And so what we're looking to do is start to describe our experience without those stories attached to them.
so we're trying to describe our experience without the stories attached or without the labels attached.
Yes, but not describe with words,
Mhm.
right? We want to describe it by becoming aware of the various aspects of it in our experience. So the moment you try and describe it with words, you're going to start using labels, and
Mhm.
that takes you into thought. It takes you away from what is actually going on. So what you're going to discover as you get into some of these things is you're going to discover that you don't get into trouble if you get all excited about something. because you're not at home with your mother anymore, or whatever, or whoever, whatever might want to inhibit you from being childlike. So I guess
Mm.
in a way you could say it is we want to release the child in you, and the child that's enthusiastic and curious and loves exploring and loves running around and shouting out. Not that we're not talking about doing that in real time essentially, but you get the flavour of it. So what
Yeah.
Marius was talking about, you going to a men's group, right? And I guess I haven't spoken to him about it, but I'm getting that he feels that there's very much a male thing involved, and it probably is true that males in Western society have certainly got a problem of not expressing themselves forever and ever, or only expressing themselves in a certain way.
Hmm.
But I don't see it as gender oriented much at all. I get what he says, and I get that there is that male thing there, but um, I think it's just there's lots of people like that too, regardless. Lots of women also have trouble expressing themselves because it's not appropriate. They were told that don't be loud, don't be this, be feminine. You know? So for a woman, being feminine might mean being quiet and whatever, and for a bloke, being masculine might mean being a yobbo. Oh, you don't know that word probably. A redneck.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So there are certain places where permission is given, but it's pretty restricted to
Hmm.
be that way.
Hmm.
Mm.
So, so when you say our job is to describe our experience without going to labels, I mean, is there a distinction between saying that I'm trying to describe my experience versus observing my experience?
Oh, no, same thing, same thing.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but what we're talking about, it gets really hard to put into words again. But let's say if you touch yourself on the end of the nose, just as a as
Hmm.
a an exercise, just do it now. Now focus on the feeling. Where's the feeling? Can you feel the feeling in your nose and your finger, or is it just one that you're feeling? What I'm
Mm,
doing is tapping the end of my nose,
mm.
and I can definitely
Ah,
feel it more in my nose than I can in my finger. That may be different for you, but that's what seems to be
yeah.
here. Yeah. And the sensation has got a kind of there's a bit of a push to it. When I touch my nose, I'm pushing the end of the nose. So there's a
Mm,
feeling of compression. Uh, and it kind of goes just a little bit bigger than where I'm actually touching. It seems to kind of radiate out just maybe a millimeter, maybe not much, around the touch area where I'm feeling it.
hmm.
And it's got another feeling that feels, well, it's almost got a color. It feels kind of light-ish. Whereas if I was to push hard, it would probably take on, I'll do that, push hard, and it takes on something a bit heavier, a bit darker.
Mm,
Like we're playing with words here, but you get that. It's if you were to try and explain to somebody who wasn't doing that exactly what the feeling is, you would find it impossible.
yeah.
But your awareness of that touch is there. Your experience of it is there. You can experience it. But if you were to dismiss it and say, "Oh, I'm just touching my nose," then you've got zero contact with what's actually going on. What you've got is you've got contact with the idea of touching your nose,
Hmm.
right? But what we're talking about is what the actual sensations are and where they are, whether they're more in your finger or your nose or both, and so on and so on and so on. So again, you can't describe it, but you can experience it.
Hmm. And
And that's
so,
that's the
mhm.
level that we want to expose.
Yeah. And another thing that I think was kind of just on my mind when you're describing that was that not wanting to change experience is kind of almost like a requisite to being able to observe the experience.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But if let's say that's an unpleasant or it's approaching unpleasantness with that, then there will be a part of you that says, I would like that to be different. I would like it to be more pleasant, or I'd like it to stop. Right?
Hmm.
Now, that's also a reality.
Hmm.
Right? Now, we don't get carried away by that. We don't go, oh, yes, well, I've got to stop now. What we do is we go, oh, there's this tendency to want to stop. That's also
Hmm.
there. Where am I feeling that? And you'll find you won't be able to locate that one in the body somewhere. But there'll be sensations about it, and
Hmm.
maybe you'll end up feeling it in the chest or the stomach or the fists or the biceps, who knows? However, whatever muscles get applied to stopping it might want to start getting active. And so this is the trick. No matter what turns up, anything, absolutely anything that turns up is okay. It's not to be judged, it is to be looked at. But if judgment happens and you recognize that judgments happen, nothing wrong with that. Don't say it's wrong. Don't say I should not have done it. Just go, okay, some judgment turned up. And,
Yeah.
and that sets you up for the next time.
Hmm. Yeah. That makes sense. When the judgment comes up, just look at it instead of judging it.
Absolutely. Yep, yep.
Hmm. Hmm.
And no matter what comes up, just look at it and go, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
You heard that story about the farmer and his son and all of that stuff?
Maybe
Um,
not.
it's kind of, I think it's probably Chinese in origin. I'm not sure about that, but regardless. Okay, so well, we've got a farmer and his son, and I'm making this up a bit as I go, but okay, the farmer comes out one morning and his horse is gone. The horse is gone, and
Oh,
so
I think you
yeah,
did tell me this one. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
okay,
I think you told me in a way where a horse showed up and everybody said it was good luck. And
yeah.
then,
And then the
yep, and
son
then
broke his leg and so
that's
on and
right.
so on. Yeah, yeah,
You you
yeah,
you, you told me that one. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So what the farmer's saying, every time somebody says this is good or this is bad, the farmer's
Hmm.
saying, well, we'll see. Yeah, maybe
Hmm.
so. Just maybe so. We don't, we're
Hmm.
not drawing any conclusions. And of course, the story flips back and forward to good news, bad news, good news, bad news, good news, and then and every time the farmer says, ah, maybe so, maybe so. Yeah. Well, that's the kind of attitude that we want to develop, that we don't have any definite stories. It's everything is maybe so, just maybe. Let's see. But I'll tell
Yeah.
you a definite right at the moment, and that is I've got to go to the toilet. I
Okay.
won't, I won't be a second.
That's all right. Do what you got to do. I'm gonna brush my teeth. It occurs to me, Vince. The person who actually told me that story, and they told me this in the past week, was my therapist.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying it, and I was like, yeah, I've definitely heard this story, and I thought it was you who told me. And then as you were saying it, I was like, no, it was my therapist, like earlier this week. So apparently, I'm just giving off the vibes of somebody who really needs to hear that story, which is kind of a funny thing. Um, but good. It's a type of, I guess, synchronicity. Uh,
Absolutely, yeah, for sure, yeah. And you can see there's a kind of a hidden part to the story that we don't really put much emphasis on, and that is that all his neighbours and everybody always came in with a judgment. They came in and said, isn't it bad? Isn't it good? So he was the
mhm.
standout, the man, the wise old farmer that said, "Yeah, we'll see."
Yeah. Hmm. And it is, I mean, that's kind of interesting because um, there is, the kind of criticism of mindfulness is that, you become a bit unfeeling, you become almost like a zombie. Like there is the like you want to be able to appreciate the good in a way, or at least that's kind of like the conventional
Yeah, yeah,
wisdom,
yeah,
right? Like if somebody gives you a gift, you want to be able to say like, "Oh, well, thank you. This is a lovely, happy occasion." You don't want to be like, "We'll see if this is good or not." You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So, so that's kind of a. I
Well, so
think
there's
that
that,
that.
there's an interesting one in that as well. And so if you were a kid and somebody gave you a gift, you would be focused 100% on what it was that they gave you, the kid.
Hmm. Hmm.
As an adult, what they're giving you is secondary to the fact that they're giving. So
Yeah.
the fact that they're offering, they're wanting good for you plays a much bigger role as an adult than it does as a kid.
Yeah. That
So
feels
so
appropriate to me.
yeah, yeah. And as a well, we'll put it this way. My experience is that I've got a lot more expressive since waking up than I ever used to be,
Mm.
I easily cry, and I easily laugh, and I easily talk too loud. My wife is constantly telling me that I'm talking too loud because I get
Mm.
excited. So, to me,
Mhm.
the waking up thing, different to the Zen bullshit that we read about while we're a seeker, but quite different to that. The opposite of that is that our filters drop, and we're not concerned about what people think of us. So the consequence is that we're going to be much more expressive than what we used to be.
Mhm. It's a natural
Well,
spontaneity. Oh yeah.
Zen masters were very intense.
Yeah, okay, good, good. Yeah, so I don't know where this idea of becoming dead is, unresponsive and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I don't know. Um, it's just something that I've heard before. You know.
Yeah, well, some people get into a nihilistic state, and that's kind of, that's kind of like akin to a depression, where
Hmm.
nothing matters anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the way
Yeah.
I see it is that we become more human with this stuff. I don't see it as a spiritual journey. I see it as a human journey. We're going to become more able to experience a full range of human emotions.
Hmm. Yeah. And I guess you know. Uh, that kind of goes back to the beginning of what we were saying, where if I have some kind of deficiency in being in touch with those emotions, that um, I maybe just need to look at it, look at what's happening without judgment. Fair enough.
Yeah, so even when you say, if I've got some deficiency, then
Hmm.
that's also gives you something to look at,
That's
So
right.
there is a judgment in the word deficiency, isn't there? It's a lack. There's something missing, etc. And
Yeah.
that's not really a good description of what. But I get what you mean. I get what you mean at a social level. But
Hmm.
no, that's so we start to look at everything.
Hmm.
And if we look at everything without that overlay of opinion, it, it changes. It becomes quite different. Can you imagine yourself super relaxed about whatever comes out of your mouth or whatever you do?
I can imagine it. Um, but yeah, it's hard to. There's kind of some resistance that seems to indicate I will I would have a really hard time doing that or making that a reality, you know?
Mm. So extend that a little bit. So that really hard time,
Mm.
is there a feeling of somebody on guard watching to make sure everything's appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a feeling, a kind of a fear or worry that I'll say something wrong or do something wrong.
Okay. Yeah. So if there's no such thing as right and wrong, we're not talking about that, are we? What we're talking about is other people thinking that it's wrong.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I'll worry that I'll offend somebody.
Mm. So extend that again, and you get what will people think of me?
Hmm.
And we're back to a self as body armor.
Hmm.
So this is a hard one and a tricky one, but I don't say this with absolute certainty, but I do believe it's the case that I don't think about what I'm going to say. Words just come out of my mouth. I don't rehearse them anyway. I don't consider what I'm going to say and consider how other people will take it. I just say it, and people will take me wrong because I believe I'm saying one thing when I'm in fact coming from a different place. So how do I respond to them taking me wrong? I don't know. Nobody's confronted me that I can remember about doing it wrong or offending somebody or whatever. I do remember fairly recently. I don't remember. Well, okay, yeah, all right, there we go. When I use those labels about your mother,
Mm.
right, the thought came to me, oh, have I overstepped? Have I gone too far? But I know what I meant, and there was nothing derogatory in it. It was a description rather than a judgment. But
Hmm.
you could have taken it as me. You could have said, don't you talk about my mother like that or whatever.
Hmm.
All sorts of possibilities could have come out from that particular one. So, I do put my foot in it. I do overstep sometimes, but it's never a big deal, I don't think. Maybe there are people that don't like me but I don't know about it. I'm sure there are people that don't like me, but do I care? I want everybody to like me. It used to be a really big deal on my part to be liked by everybody I came into contact with. But back then, I used to try and be how I thought they wanted me to be so they would like me. Now I say, I don't care. If you don't like me, you don't like me. That's just the way it is. But when I say I don't like what I imagine might happen with Trump running the show, I have to come back and re-examine that one. And when I do that, I recognize that I have certain beliefs about things that are worthy of looking at. So we're not looking at any finished product here. We're looking at an ongoing uh, adventure. Best way to put it, I think. And whether you realise it or not, I am imagining I believe that you've shifted considerably from when we first started to talk.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Um, but it's I guess unless I think pretty hard about it and try to compare my what my reactions may have been in the past to whatever I feel now, it's hard for me to really see. And
Yep.
that's okay. It's not like concerning to me. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah. Why would you bother, really? That's right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
get used to things pretty quickly. And so, how we used to be, we forget about that. You'll
Hmm.
think of occasionally stories will come up about how it used to be and how it's not now, but most of the time you won't even remember how it used to be.
Hmm.
Yeah. Can you imagine, can you imagine how much energy gets freed up when you're able to be spontaneous and not think about how others might take you?
Yeah.
It's it's huge.
Yeah. It kind of feels like a deeply ingrained tendency though to worry about how people are going to take whatever I say or do.
Yeah.
Like I'm really something really difficult to let go of,
Yep.
just because that's been that's kind of
Forever. Forever and ever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Think about how your actions affect others, and I mean that's just I don't know. That's been a big part of growing up.
Yep. Absolutely. I get that. So when you say think of how your actions affect others,
Hmm.
that's a really big area. That's really complex. There's a lot goes on in that one, isn't it? So how your actions affect others that you like, others that are in, say, an inner circle has a different connotation than how strangers might take you.
Mm.
But as a kid, I can rather imagine that this was a lesson that you got on a regular basis. Be careful so you don't offend other people or you don't do the wrong thing. How others see you is very important.
Hmm.
And so you, unless you were alone and by yourself, you were constantly on guard for how you might be perceived.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That is huge. You can just see how deep that kind of brainwashing goes into you.
Yeah, I mean that's it's still very much a part of my day-to-day life even now though. You know, like um, like the our professionalism is something that's constantly talked about and evaluated in the workplace. And
Oh yes,
yeah.
in the community of doctors, this is a very high priority, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, and there's like so many expectations that are placed on, you know, me on just like a day-to-day basis. And that's, some of that is self-imposed too, but you know, patients or their families will be like, "Well, you know about this, or like you should know about this." And there's definitely a part of me that believes it's like, oh yeah, I guess I should know about this. Or if I don't know about this, that means I'm, negligent or ignorant or something.
Mm.
And so I don't know, in a way that thinking about how my actions or words affect other people's image of me is, I mean, it's a daily occurrence, like multiple times a day, just
Mm.
kind of constantly throughout the day.
Yep. So if you had to pluck a figure out of the air, would you say that 50% of your energy or 60, or what percentage of your energy would you say gets tied up in being concerned about how you are perceived? You don't have to put an actual figure. Could you say a lot?
It's hard to separate, right? Because I think that basically what I spend my energy doing is trying to know everything about everyone. And there's both the practical utility to doing that, and then there's also a performative aspect to it that, like, you can't, at least for me, like, I have a hard time separating the two, right? Like, I
Mm,
want to know everything both because it's practically useful and because I want people to think that I'm competent and diligent. And when I don't know something that I feel like maybe I should, that's a failure on both fronts. Where it's like I'm not able to be practically useful because I don't know this information, and that makes me feel like other people think I'm, not smart or diligent. So
mm,
it's hard to say. Like those things are so intertwined that I don't know that I could put any kind of value on one versus the other.
mm. So when you said that, I had this question popped up.
Hmm.
Do you think you're smart and diligent?
Not consistently. Yeah. I think that's one of the big things that I'm I kind of struggle with the idea that I'm not a consistent person, right? Like
Oh
I'm not
yeah, and
reliable in that way.
there's some judgment there, eh? Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of judgment there. And then there's also a bit of understanding that, like nobody's consistent necessarily. It's not really
Not a human trait, is it really?
right. Like it's a hard thing to aspire to. Um, and yet I feel like I can come up with examples of, people in my life who are like, oh, they're consistent. They're always there when I need them. You can always count on them to do X, Y, or Z. And so I feel like that's both an admirable trait and one that I should be able to cultivate. Um, so, so yeah, there's some dissonance there,
Mm,
like cognitive dissonance.
yep, yep.
Hmm.
And yet, I imagine my reading of you is such that I imagine that if anybody asked you for help, you would be 100% there for anything.
Hmm.
Am I wrong in my judgment of you?
I mean, I have my doubts about it, right? Like, I think, I mean, it's a very kind thing to say.
I wasn't being
Uh,
kind. That's the way I read you. I read you as a person that is willing in that area to be helpful.
I mean, I would say that I have my doubts. I have my doubts about that, depending on just, how much sleep I got the night before, what's going on in my life, like what other things I have going on. I always strive to help for sure, but there are times when I feel like I'm maybe less capable of it or less willing to do, um, you know,
Yep. Yeah.
or maybe I'll do the bare minimum instead of going above and beyond, or I'll prioritize certain things. Um,
Well, of course, it depends entirely on circumstances, doesn't it? Really, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what you describe sounds pretty human to me.
hmm But still, maybe it's just because of my expectations and my sort of beliefs about work and my job. It does feel kind of shameful almost. Like I want to be able to say anytime somebody needs help from me, 100% of the time they'll get the best version of me who's going to go above and beyond. And that's kind of what people, my perception is that's what people expect. And that's kind of what I expect of myself. But to be human and to say, I don't always feel like I can bring that depending on,
Yeah, yeah,
conditions or
yeah, yeah.
whatever. Like it feels a bit shameful to say that.
So why would you feel shame if you recognise that you're really tired and that you don't have an inclination to be that way? Why would that be shameful?
Because I feel like other people would expect that of me and I kind of believe that they might be right. That that's
So, so what? You've got a superhuman part of you that you can trot out when something like that happens.
mhm.
So here's some cognitive dissonance. So the difference is, right, you're really exhausted. You're really tired. You're really exhausted. You haven't got much energy. You whatever, and somebody asks you for something, and you're not willing to throw everything into it because you're so tired. I just describe circumstances, and they seem to be me perfectly reasonable. But you're going to feel bad because under those circumstances, you still can't give what you think you should be able to give.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like mm, a pretty accurate description of how I'd feel in that situation.
So if we were to move into a mode where we are aware of what we are experiencing and we recognize that circumstances or conditions play a huge role in all of that, can you let go of the judgment about yourself?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I think so. It may take a little bit of time, take a little
Well,
bit of relaxing.
let's reverse it. Let's say, what would it take to hang on to a judgment under the very reasonable circumstances that you haven't got what you think you should have,
Mm,
right? So in order to judge that, you have to ignore the fact that you're tired. You have to ignore the fact that you've got low energy. You have to ignore the fact that your focus is somewhere else. You have to pretend a whole lot of stuff in order to be able to maintain the idea that that's how you should be.
yeah, I suppose so. I mean, the thought seems very simple, which is just that I should always be able to do this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's a fairy story, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that ignores all of these extenuating circumstances.
Mm. But you're recognizing in yourself at the moment that in spite of those extenuating circumstances, you still demand something totally unrealistic of yourself. and then you feel bad when you don't deliver. That's a double
Yeah.
whammy. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Do you have the same expectations for others, Ray? Do you expect them to be
Hmm.
on top of their game at all times, every second of the day?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Probably depends on who it is. Like if it's someone I don't like or find it easy to judge, then I might be like, well, they should be able to do this or that. Whereas if it's somebody I like and have compassion for, I might be like, don't beat yourself up about it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the chances that, well, two things I want to say. The chances that people have share your expectations or, I mean, share your expectations of yourself, like they look at you and others in the same way, um, are probably slim to none. Maybe you have somebody, high achievers, who look at the world like that, but um, we tend to see the world as, or we assume that the world is how we see it, and like share our view on things, but um, that is usually never the case. And we also tend to believe that the world revolves around us, so that if we don't live up to our expectations, that everybody notices, everybody cares, everybody judges, when really it's just a blip in their day. Maybe they will get pissed off and then they'll move on and then they'll forget it and then they won't think of you until perhaps maybe another time they you piss them off. But they're
Yeah.
more focused on their own shit rather than how you are not up to par every second of the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. Um, I think so. What comes to mind now is, and this sounds argumentative, but I don't mean it as such. But I think just like the emotional charge of some of the work that I do, in which like I'm dealing with someone's loved one, oftentimes in like one of the most challenging or scariest times of their lives, is, and I recognize also that's a story that I'm kind of telling myself in a lot of ways. Um, I don't know. The thought crosses my mind that like maybe this is pressure that I just isn't healthy for me, you know? Both the
Yeah.
pressure that I'm putting on myself and the pressure maybe of the situation that I've put myself in. But it's hard to separate the two.
When I was listening to you share, I noticed a knot in my stomach, like it was something that got triggered. And when feeling into it, it was the same knot that I remember having daily at my previous job before I got burnout a year ago and been off sick leave since then. So I'm only saying this because I remember the expectations that I put on myself, or I remember the similarities in kind of expecting the best and thinking other people put me in that same like they expected the same that I did of myself. And so I just drove myself to into the wall because I was living in a delusion. Even though people were constantly telling me that, like, dude, we're really happy with what you're doing. Uh, you don't need to overachieve every time. And I just didn't hear it. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't believe what they were saying. Um, until I just my body and mind couldn't handle it anymore. And so I when I listened to you, I yeah, something some emotional remnants of that time gets triggered in me.
Yeah.
Um, and one more thing I want to point out is that that takes so much energy that you like you could probably like try to imagine it, but it would be way off. It takes
Mm.
so much more energy than you realize, but you can't really feel that accurately because you've been in it for so long. So it's kind of your normal.
Mhm.
Um, if you by grace were to stop having those expectations of yourself, you actually would probably be closer to actually um, being that type of person you're trying to be because you would have more energy to actually give, but from a natural place, not from a trap like a place where you feel like you have to perform, but you would just naturally be overflowing with more energy, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And that does intuitively make sense to me. Um, yeah, I will say I feel like I've loosened up quite a bit. Um, I used to feel a lot more I used to more consistently feel what I'm expressing now in terms of like inadequacy and pressure I'm putting on myself at work. Um, so it's almost like for a while when things were going pretty bad, I kind of tried to take the pressure off myself as much as possible. And I was kind of told myself I'm going to do, I don't want to say like the bare minimum because that sounds bad in a lot of ways, but I was just kind of like, I'm going to do just what I need to do. And I'm not going to put this pressure on, like so much pressure on myself. And um, yeah, I mean, that really seemed to work better for me in a lot of ways. But I think there's still some guilt about it that pops up every so often. And I'm trying to think like what triggers it. And I think that it might just be when somebody expresses to me that, well, I don't know. It's almost like a casual comment where they'll say something, they'll be like, "But you probably already know all about this." And sometimes I don't take it in stride. Like sometimes sometimes I'm like, "Well, I didn't, I won't say it out loud, but I'll just be like, "Well, I didn't know that." And I feel a little bad about it. Um, but I think that what you're saying is true, and maybe it's just going to take a little while for me to settle into it and feel more comfortable with that, just with that set of circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect, or I will speak for myself. This came from just um, a deep, call it emotional wound of um, unworthiness. So I kept trying to prove my worth through validation from others, right? And so when I did a good job and I got the pat on the back, I didn't hear it. It was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then when I did a bad job, or apparently bad job, and I got some criticism or like just even the slightest remark, and it would feel like a total failure. And I will go into stories about self-criticizing and, about how I should have done this and I should have done that. And then I would spend, so much time and so much energy on stories that is just fantasy. It's just it's fantasy land, it's not real.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's the important part to recognize. It's just that all the things that you imagine people might say or what people mean by some remarks or a comment or all of that is just bullshit. It's just imagine fantasy. So um, yeah, I think trying to remind yourself that your mind is kind of set up to think the worst in those situations and just let yourself off the hook. Hopefully, uh, after having this conversation, we might pop up in your head next time you beat yourself up, and you'll just let it go.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
I can just confirm this as someone who knows burnout and the pressure of being the best and the smartest. And what do my students think of me when I say something? It's all true what Mario said.
Yeah. I I can kind of remember now. Um, there's this moment in my childhood. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember it was kind of just um, a thought that popped in my head that I really believed, where I said, if I want to constantly improve and be like the best person that I can be, I basically just have to be never be satisfied with myself and who I am. And yeah, at the time I was just like, oh, that's easy. That's simple. That's the formula for being the best that I can be. And yeah, I feel like now I'm just kind of seeing the cost of that strategy and kind of believing that thought. And oof, it's a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, and either you really take that in, like after this meeting, sit down and really meditate on that and take it seriously, or you might end up where I did, or Maya would burn up. I mean, I had my ideas and thoughts and fantasies when I heard about people having burnout. And I don't know if burnout actually means the same in English as it does in Norwegian. I've heard might probably not. But
Mm.
basically my whole body and mind just shut down for a year. Like I haven't been able to work. I haven't been able to, socialize other than you know, a few meetings like this here and there. Now it's a lot better, but like it took a long, long, long time, and I couldn't do my call it duties and things for my for my own family. So I'm just I'm just pushing a little bit on the seriousness of not listening to your body. Um,
Hmm.
One thing is to, be the best that you can be and all of that, but like you already are. You already are exactly the best that you can be. So any other expectations than what you actually are is just bullshit because you are who you are in this very moment.
Yeah. I played
Yeah.
golf for years. I played 3 games a week of golf. And in all of that time, I never, ever, ever saw somebody swing at a ball without trying to do their very best every single shot. 70 or 80 times every game, people would be trying to do their best. Absolutely, 100%. Their best. And it's not possible to not try and do your best. You kind of can you imagine doing your job and saying to somebody, I don't know, whether it was not doing your job properly. You're going to do your best every time, I'm sure.
Hmm.
If you're tired, you might be able to come up later on and say, "Oh, I could have done better," but you couldn't have because you were tired or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's this basic assumption when you say never be satisfied. There's always that thing that says because you can do more, you can do it better, and it's bullshit.
I have you explored the concept of free will or control?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, a bit. Yeah. I think I'm pretty convinced at this point that your choice and free will are not um or maybe a misperception, right? But it's a bit tricky because like in my experience, I still I don't know. I feel like they're there. But I think I've looked at them closely enough that I recognize that they're not, or they're an illusion. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So maybe look at it some more because like don't just conclude intellectually and then move on. I would recommend and but even like if you do that or not, that is not up to you.
yeah,
Just taking that as an argument. So if you don't have control and if you don't have free will, how how can you feel like how does it make sense to feel guilty for not doing more than you have done? Or how does it make sense to feel shame for things you have done in the past, for example? Um, how does it make sense to have expectations when you know you don't have any control anyways? So it's going to be how it's going to be. it doesn't make sense to have any expectations anymore because there's no control. It's going to be how it's going to be anyways. Like really guilt, shame, and even pride. Pride. Like there's nobody doing it, so why are you like? Or to say it in a different way, there's no owner of whatever you do, so there's no reason to be proud of it because it's just basically programming anyways. All of these things that is tied to what we do in every moment is just a result of your biological and psychological programming. You have zero control. So that also lets you off the hook of guilt and shame and expectations and pride and worry and anxiety if you really drill down to it and really, really like look at it closely enough to convince yourself that you don't have free will.
Yeah.
It is
That
it
was
is a
really helpful
trick.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a trick not to approach that intellectually,
Yeah.
because we want to, and that's the way it's almost presented to us as an intellectual conundrum, this idea of free will. But approach it from another angle where you can see how many of the conditions that you can actually see are definitely not all of the conditions. There's an infinite number of conditions involved in everything, in any happening, but you can see some of the conditions, and you don't have to see that many to realize that the shape of the outcome is going to be determined by what conditions are there. Now, those
Yeah.
conditions are in constant ebb and flow, or however you want to describe it. They're constantly changing. So, although we don't have free will, we don't also live in a deterministic world. So there's no outcome that is determined before it happens. Just because even as it's forming to happen, conditions can change. Because each condition rests on its conditioning, its conditions. So every condition involved in anything has conditions, and each of those conditions have conditions, and each of those have conditions. There's no end to it. So because of all those conditions always being in flux, in changing, it's not a deterministic outcome by any means. But it's exactly that same argument that takes you to recognizing in your daily life how things just happen. So you can consider choice, decisions, control is all part of the same thing. They're just different ways of looking at all of those same things. And you can see very easily how every one of those is not predetermined. It will happen the way it happens because of everything else that's already happened.
Yeah.
And then
And
you just got
also
to,
like, yeah, I just want to point out that our subjective understanding of something, like if I say, let's say, um, truth, that word or that concept, when the way that I understand it here in my experience is totally different from the concept of truth that you understand it. Even though there might be similarities, there are vast amounts of difference inside of that concept, right? And if you take that logic that we all have our subjective interpretation of stuff, then even that comes into the factor as a condition of control and free will, right? Because there's no way that when you want to relate something to a patient or a friend or a family member or something, you say something, there's no way for you to know or control how they take what you say, because that is totally up to their conditioning and their also conditions in that moment. They might be pissed off from something else that day. They might be in emotional turmoil. They might be in love with you. They might be like, there's so many different things that determine how they take what you say and understand it. So you have zero control over how you are perceived, right? So like Vince just said, the conditions around the conditions around the conditions is like uh, it's clear that we have no control whatsoever. Even your intentions, you're not, it's not like you have um, a little intention master in back of your head going through into the intention vault and picking up deliberately what intention you're going to have in that moment. It just pops up in your head randomly, or I don't know if it's randomly or not, but you didn't choose it. It popped up, right? And
Yeah.
that intention, how that comes out, is also going to be affected of your energy levels, your mood, your circumstances in that moment. There's so many different factors. Like, we're not in control, so just go with the flow, basically, because it is a flow. It's just what's happening.
Yeah. I think I just occasionally get caught in the habits of going back to seeing things how I've seen them before. Um,
Of course, that's big, isn't
yeah.
it? That's strong. That's been there a long time and been had lots of repetitions and everything. Yeah.
Mm.
One of the things that I use that I rather like to get people to appreciate the what really goes on with this idea of control is when you walked across the room to get where you are now, how much thinking was involved?
Very little.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, you can almost not remember taking step after step after step to get there. It just happened, didn't it? And yet I've been walking across the floor for many years, and I was at my daughter's place a few days ago, and I walked around the side of the bed that we were going to sleep in, and I stubbed my toe on the leg of the bed that was sticking out. Oh God, it hurt like hell. Turned my toe blue for a few days. That's how much I hurt because I had no shoes on when I kicked it. So I could say, well, I controlled how I walked across the room, but I didn't control it when I kicked the leg of the bed and hurt myself. And then you can immediately see what a ridiculous story. I mean, where's the control or lack of control? Right? Again, just circumstances were involved in it. but we do all day, you know, where there are those really interesting things like breathing. You can say, well, you know, I haven't thought about breathing, but now I'm talking about it. I can hold my breath. So there you go. I proved that I can control things. But where did the idea come from to do it? Was it actually control, or is that we're just describing it as that? The thought popped up that I would hold my breath, and because of the biology involved, I was able to do that for a moment. But I wouldn't say that there was any control in it. It could be described as control, but that doesn't pay attention to this, the, the surrounding everything that's got there to do it.
Yeah, the sense of control is a gift. It's a gift that we feel like we are in control, or else I think it would feel limiting. Like if we don't really, you feel like there's an attention to pick up the cup. You don't feel controlled to do so. So that is a gift in itself. But I think that when we really get down to the details and really look at what is actually happening enough times, we come to accept that we're not in control, and also in doing so releasing those things as guilt and shame and all of that, which I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, you know, it's like an infinite grace. It's a bit of a relief. It's also relinquishing credit and
Yeah,
pride. Yeah.
yeah,
But you know, I think it's one of those things that I feel like I can see it when I look. I just have to see it more before it becomes
yeah,
automatic.
yeah.
But it's,
And 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 that's a good point. While you guys were talking just now, I just also just wanted to take us back to now. That's the ultimate uh, kind of release, because all of what we've been talking about is in thought land, right? And so if you
mhm.
could just remember that when you're in fantasy land, that just okay, but what is what is here that is not thoughts? Then you're suddenly out of all of that bullshit that we were just discussing.
Mhm.
You can, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the most important part, I would say, to just get into the habit of getting out of thought and into direct experience again and again and again until you fall in love with just being in direct experience.
Mhm.
Because it's a beautiful place. I mean, if I look around and I notice the mind starts to label, and then I kind of have this automatic reminder that, okay, stop labeling. And then I just look at things without labels, and then just, what the hell is all of this? You know, it's so mysterious and wonderful, like how all the small details that I haven't noticed before because I was labeling and just taking everything for granted. If you really just study every detail of every thing that's in your experience, then you're just in an amazing place. But that takes, you know, it takes getting out of the mind.
When we live in the mind, which was
I
what we've
want to
been.
talk about something else.
Yes, go on.
something happened, and I talked with a friend, and my fundamental belief that it would be better for me to never exist got a bit shaken. Not a big earthquake, just a minor tremor, but it was shaken. He is studying psychology, and he was talking about schizoid personality. And disclaimer, I do not have schizoid personality, but I have, or I had in the past, some characteristic. And one thing he said is that the basic script decision or basic belief in this is my life threatens my life. And it is formed in an infant. So it is, well, it is a translation because it is formed as a non-verbal thought. And well, for me, it was, oh, so this fundamental belief that led me all my life, all and through this spiritual path, it can be explained by psychology. And I could almost see the divide. Like my mind was, oh, that's curious. That's interesting. And in my body, there was just fear. It was felt like this vertical line, like I was getting narrower and constricting in the middle. Because it is like I lived a lie. And on the other hand, that it is a core belief for me. And when I look beneath this core, there is absolutely nothing.
So what was the fear about? The fear that you would have to change the way you believe things
No,
were? No?
there is nothing. There is no right way. All of this is conditioned. I don't know. Beneath it is just a body that eats, sleeps, and defecates.
So my first reaction is that That's good. That's where we want to get to, where the body just eats, sleeps, and defecates. But for you, that was annihilation,
Well, as I said before, it feels soulless.
soulless. Yeah. Mm. So, what is the soul, or what is if if soulness is a thing, is there soulful or having a soul? In that case, what is that? Is that something that gives the body that eats, sleeps, and defecates something more?
Yeah, something more.
Mm.
Maybe
Is it?
that is the fear, that there is nothing more.
Mm.
Just sleep, eat, and defecate.
But there obviously is more. What about the fact that you are conscious, the fact that you are aware? That's not just a body. That's something extra to the body.
Who knows?
That's just
It
body
may,
too, you
it's
say. Yeah.
it's just a function of a body.
Well, then would you not say that that's what soul is? That's just a function of the body too?
Um, it's hard to describe because it's just I just try to describe a feeling
Mm, mm.
and not a thing. That you have a thing called the soul.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
All
it's
right. That
not
feeling,
this.
that
Mhm.
feeling you can say is just a bodily function too, but it's more than just physical, isn't it? Your imagination is more than just physical.
But it is still based on physical.
Mm. What about this one? This is a bit of a trick. So you mentioned earlier that non-existence would be your preferred something. And isn't soulless a form of non-existence?
No, If there is consciousness or awareness, there is existence.
Bianca, do you recognize that all of these is like a fixation of thought, like thoughts about there isn't any more? Like it, or to say it in a different way, if you don't, if you just stay with what is here and not fixate on there being a soul or not being a soul, or there being more than only the physical or not being more than the physical, there is this, there is your experience. But when you start contemplating or reflecting on the
Yes,
emptiness of everything, then it becomes the problem.
it's just so sad.
Yeah, it's like if I just to put it in a different example, if I think about my dog dying, which he isn't, but if I were to think about that, it would be really sad. And so if I fixate on that idea, I would feel sad, and I would feel sad until I don't. It's kind of the same thing. Obviously, your example is deeper. I understand that, but it's the same creation of a false reality, because reality is outside of thought. It's just your experience right now, right here.
I have nothing more to say.
How have you been, Maya?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm good. I'm here in hospital to get a um, a tube down my throat to have a look at some pathology that came back. That's all. So it's just a routine procedure.
Fingers crossed.
Endoscope, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. I have a beginner's question. What does it mean to see through self?
The classic answer from the perspective of Liberation Unleashed is to recognize that there is no actual separate self in there running the show. So anybody that describes life from the perspective of a self, I am, this is mine, etc., is taking a concept and relating to it like it was something actual. I can take my own, thanks. So it's really just recognizing the delusion of a self running the show.
Okay. I was listening to Pernille, and then there was something like first, what you first need to do is see through self, and then you can go on. But isn't this like a pretty high achievement to understand that there is no one running the show?
So instead of chasing that no one is running the show, if we were to focus on what actually exists, you could see that what runs the show are circumstances, conditions. That's a lot
Yeah.
easier to see than the absence of something. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, this is easier. Yes, this is easier. And it's going slowly for me, but it's going. It didn't fall in one big event for me, but it's falling like
Yeah.
piece by piece.
Yeah. Many of your experiences that you've described to me would relate back to recognizing that circumstances are what decides what happens.
Yeah. I I mean the funniest one was with when I spoke and when I saw that I was just I was just speaking and not thinking. Yeah, this is the funniest one. But also when I think about other people, why did they do something or why did something happen? Because everything that happened before and because it happened.
Yep. So no matter
Yeah.
what people think the reason for something happening, you can guarantee that there'll be 1,000 things that they never thought of that are all involved in that.
Yes.
So to say that if I have an intention to do something, people who are fully in the delusion would believe that the only reason that something happens is because of their intention. when I see an intention arise, I can also see that it's just one of the conditions that may or may not lead to that thing happening.
Yeah.
Because many times I've had intentions that have never been carried out.
Yeah. I'm observing intentions that are not carried out. When I think of saying something, but when I think of saying something, I can feel in my tongue the tension, the wish to move, but I also decide not to speak. So there is only this movement that wasn't carried out, or
Mm,
lifting
mm.
my hand, arm, or something.
Yep, yep, yep. That reminds me of one that if you observe people closely, sit in a a shopping mall or something and watch people. I find that really fascinating. It's amazing how many people you'll see and their lips are moving like they're talking, but they're by themselves and they're
Mm,
not actually saying anything out loud. Not that it's perceptible out loud,
mm,
but their mouth is echoing their thoughts.
yeah. Mm,
I used to get always, I found this really interesting, this idea of copyright. And I'm thinking, now, once I say a word and it's out there and the sound is out in the air, how can I say I own it? It's not possible to own something that's, you know, do I own the breath that comes out of my lungs? Do I own the sound
yeah.
that comes out when I speak? I don't own any of that stuff. Yet people are prepared to kill to protect a reputation.
To claim ownership.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. When you say it like this, there is no ownership because there's no one to own.
absolutely.
Because we are just results of circumstances, and we are not.
Yeah.
And what we do is just result of circumstances. So there is no one to own the results of what we produce.
So we've got to be a bit careful with that one because that there is no one to own can be taken can be it can be taken the wrong way or it can be used the wrong way. So if you arrive at a logical conclusion because of that, then that's bypassing. But
Yeah.
if you're in with the feeling that there was no one there, and I mean, what is ownership? How can is I mean, if I've got a rope tied around something, I can say I own it. There's a kind of a physical connection there, because I'm holding on to it. But I can't say that I own, my house. That's hundreds of kilometres away from where I am now. How can I say I own it? I have this bit of paper that says I own it. I have proof of money paid, but they're all quite separate things. There is no actual ownership, is there? Maybe in the eyes of the law, in concept land, we could say yes, there's ownership, but in terms of the person, you and I, we don't even own the face on our own body.
This was the first time I had a glimpse of it because it's very often said there's no one to blah blah, and there are whole schools of non-duality basing on this. There's no one to something, anything. What does it actually mean? Yeah, this is the first time I had a glimpse. And how far will it go? We'll see. I'll play with it in the next days.
Mm.
Maybe it
But
goes away completely, like a wave on the beach. The wave comes and then recedes again. But
mm,
sometimes something stays.
yeah, I love that response. I mean, that's a shift. That glimpse is a
Yeah.
shift. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
and how much stuff rests on that. You'll discover things that rest on that delusion of ownership as
But
well.
then,
Yeah.
but then I go into my head and I start thinking, and then it's lost. But it will come again. Well, now my attitude now, it's when it's time or if it's appropriate, then it will come again.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, it will happen.
I think I'll fake it till I make it. The awakening. I don't know.
And when the totally crazy thing is when you see that you're awakened, you'll recognize that there's no such thing as awakening. It only exists for people who are not awake.
But there must be something different. There must be something different.
Yeah.
Perspective.
Sure, there are differences, but it's like a lot of other things I say, no surgeon can find it. It can't be put in a bottle. It doesn't exist as an entity. There's no thing. And there's a kind of a humorous irony as well, and that is that a point will be reached, maybe not too far for you now, where emptiness starts to come into your mind about or your experience about things. Emptiness meaning, in the Buddhist sense, emptiness meaning that there is no inherent characteristic of anything in anything. Right. So if we take this hospital mug made out of cardboard and we could say there is no cupness or mugness inherent in this shape. But when I call it a cup or a mug, I say it's a container to hold, in this case, water for me to drink. But if I emptied the water out of it and stood on it and flattened it, is it still a cup? And so the
Oh,
characteristic of cupness is is only attributed to it mentally.
yes, I have parts of it. I already have parts of it. I teach this to my students, because uh, there is a linguistic discussion about what is a cup, mug, and glass. Where's the boundary from one category and the other? There are things that are between categories. We talk often about it. Is what's a bird? And then they say, I don't know, robin, pigeon, sparrow, or something. Is an ostrich a bird? Is a penguin a bird? So I know a bit about it. I don't have it completely fully in me, but I know. And if you
But
have a
you've got a
chair,
head start on it. Yeah.
yeah. If you have a chair, I ask my students, okay, if you take one leg of it, is it still a chair? If you take two legs, okay, but if you burn it down, it's a pile of ash. It's still a chair. It's the same material, but when
Mm.
does it stop being a chair?
Well, here's the classic example. You could use the chair or the cup. Let's say we've got this paper cup and I've emptied the water out of it and I've put it on the floor and I've stood on it. And if you and I agree that it's a cup before I did that, after I've stood on it, when we look at it, very likely we would both say it's still a cup. It's just a squashed cup. right? It no longer can contain a liquid because I've squashed it. Right? But if somebody came along who didn't see it as a whole cup, they might say, "Oh, it's just a mess on the floor, or it's just cardboard," you know. So again, we will overlay it with our own stories.
Yeah.
And it's always
Finding
our own stories that give it the characteristic that we call cup or chair or whatever.
assigning meaning, right?
Yes, perfect. Yes, exactly. Yep. Yeah,
But this is the same then if you have a sensation, the meaning that you assign to this sensation can be different.
absolutely. Yeah.
It can be some kind of pain that you're afraid of, or it can be the same kind of pain, but after exercise and you feel well because you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or it can be fear, or it can be excitement. And it's
Yeah.
essentially the same sensation, but with different meanings applied to it.
Different meaning. And
Mm.
this is now uh, this is now this 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 connection between the sensation and thought just coexisting, just being in correlation and not
Yes,
correlation.
perfect. Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. It's going slowly. It's going slowly. It often ends up in my head, and then I'm analyzing it, but trying not to. But
Yeah,
the more often in my head, the more true in me. So it's good either way.
mm, yeah. Just be relaxed
Yeah,
about whatever happens, whatever turns up. You know,
yeah,
you've got the right magnifying glass out. You're looking at things in the right way. You've got the tools, if you like, to recognize a whole lot of this stuff. So it's just more discovery.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think I dropped a lot of expectations, so it's just relaxing now.
yeah, that's big. That's really big. Yeah, yeah. Expectations certainly get in the road. It's like when you're looking for something, everything in the world looks like what you're looking for. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Virgin Mary on the toast.
Mm, yes. All right. Well, happy discovering. I'm going to go and eat my tea now. I'm on clear fluids tonight, so I've got some soup for tea.
Oh,
Mm,
wish you luck.
yeah, it'll be okay, or not.
Uh, no, it will be okay. I won't agree with the other one.
Okay. Well, see, my or not said it'll still be okay if it's not.
I know, but I know.
Yeah. My my
Thanks.
my my calendar told me this morning that it was the 10th anniversary of my mother-in-law's death, and
Oh,
she would have been 105 today if she was still alive. And of course that makes you think, you know, I'm 78 this year, and I think reasonably, I could, if I had 10 years or 15 years or 20. Now 20's really stretching it, eh? Am I going to be 98 when I die? That's possible, but I'm very unlikely I'm going to be 110 or 115. That's, who knows? So as we approach, we have to shift our ideas about it, I think. So if I die
Right.
tomorrow on the operating table, well, I don't care. I'm not going to know about it. You'll have to take
I
over the
know.
group, so
I know all of this. I know. I don't like many of these.
yeah,
So be well. Uh, I wish that everything goes well, and see you on Saturday then, because
yeah,
for selfish reasons. If nothing else, for selfish reasons.
yeah. I'll be okay. See you later.
Yeah. Bye.